Hello, horror addicts. Or should I say, good evening. Kristin Battestella, aka Kbatz here. I'm inside my video cabinet getting out some Alfred Hitchcock for my annual marathons. We've already talked a little bit about Alfred Hitchcock, some of the earlier material at horroraddicts.net. Lifeboat, The Lady Vanishes, The 39 Steps, Sabotage, Saboteur, Murder. A lot of the early ones that are from the 20s, 30s, or 40s, they're a lot different from things like Psycho, which we will talk about. I don't want to spend all my time talking about Psycho. Um, I wrote a blog a long time ago now about that maybe we underappreciate Psycho these days because it's the granddaddy slasher, everybody knows about it, it's old, it was the first, but there's a reason that it's scary. When I was a kid, I couldn't get enough of Psycho. I wasn't scared by it. I enjoyed terrorizing my sister by dressing up, rocking chair, wig, fake knife, and all, but I wanted to know why it was scary. And I think that my favorite scene in the film actually sort of sums that up quite well. So, spoiler alert, it's actually the death of Arbogast. Now, if I was really technical, I could probably have the little clip playing for you, but I'm not that fancy. Um, Arbogast is the lawman, the detective who's been hired to investigate. And, he knocks on the door, he's calling for Mrs. Bates, he enters the home. And he's the lawman, he's entitled to do that. This was how it was back in 1960. He looks around the dining room, the kitchen, maybe doesn't see anybody, so he goes up the stairs. And at that point, we see the little sliver of light with the door cracking open, that someone is there, someone is in Mother's room, which, although we tend to think of the kitchen maybe as the hearth of the home, the upper floor, the mother's bedroom, was very much the inner sanctum, sort of the big Victorian home. So here's Arbogast. He's coming to the top of the stairs. And then we get the overhead shot where the mother that we know as Norman dressed as a woman here comes and attacks Arbogast. And we get that great technical shot, which maybe some people today might laugh at a little bit as he's flailing down the stairs, but that was actually a really advanced technique. He's falling down, he's at the bottom of the stairs. So we have, the lawman, the man, the king of the castle, who went from the top, is down at the bottom of the stairs. And then we don't see anything. We see this, mother dress kind of come lean beside him, and we see the knife coming up and down, in and out of the frame. We hear a few gasps and a few little splishes, but we really don't see anything shocking, and yet it is one of the most terrifying scenes. And I think there was a lot of sociological and psychological aspects at the time that is what made that so shocking. You have here the man who was at the top, who's now at the bottom, the man who's dressed as a woman in this strange perversion with this obsession with mother, who is penetrating the man. It is very much a very shocking reversal for 1960. Now, there were a few things changing. Earlier, Some Like It Hot was pushing the envelope, the Hays Code was coming to an end, but we tend to think of the decades as going by number, but the 60s maybe really didn't come into until the Kennedy assassination. 1960 was very still much 50s mom, dad, boy, girl, dog, white picket fence. There were scary things going on, all the McCarthyism and all the House Un-American Activities investigations. But a lot of that was dealt on screen with The Blob, or The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, or Earth versus the Flying Saucers. And even in horror, it was always monsters at that point. Now we had this sort of science fiction kind of aspect where it was very, this can't really happen. We're going to the cinema. There was the matinee thing to do because it was entertainment, not that it was necessarily really expressing actual fears. And Robert Bloch's book, Psycho, of course, is based on, I'm bad with pronunciations, we know, right, Kbatz? Ed Gein was the serial killer that the book is based on. There's also a later film called Motel Hell that also uses parts of his story. He was very cannibal, into dressing in flesh, very creepy. So all of this was very shocking in 1960. They didn't see films like that. Psycho was shot in black and white on the cheap. It was very risque, even in the beginning when we have the opening shot that peers into the window. It's a woman wearing black lingerie, and she's meeting in the motel in the middle of the afternoon with a man who's not her husband. That was very shocking. So that kind of layer of this extra kind of sociological kind of nuances, I think, is what keeps Psycho so good. You know, today we have all these formulaic slashers. We've also been recently discussing at Horror Addicts about a lot of the cliches that we're tired of seeing. And every October, there's always a slasher. It's always the same. We can always predict it and tear it apart, but it is popcorn. It is baseless. Everybody goes. Hollywood counts on that box office, and that's that. So then people are surprised when horror turns out to be good, when they say now horror is the thriller and now there's elevated horror that's better. It's always been there. If you've been following along in the genre, you always knew where to find that kind of quality horror. And I think when there's that extra layer that stays with you, we're all driving by, looking at a motel going, that's creepy. I'm not going to stay there. You know, people are still afraid to go on the water just because of Jaws. So I like that aspect of Psycho. Rear Window also, I think, is very similar in that aspect. When I'm doing some marathons and I say to everybody, you should see Rear Window, they say, well, that's not horror. You know, it's Jimmy Stewart. You know, he's laid up with a broken leg and he's spying on his neighbors. And he thinks he sees a murder. But especially now, I think that film has again come around with what we think we know, what we can probably deduce very accurately by paying attention to our neighbors, or what we can presume. You know, did he kill his wife? We don't know. And I also think of the sitcom Frasier, where Frasier buys his father a telescope, and he says, just think of it as having hundreds of different channels to watch. And very similar to Rear Window and Psycho, around the same time in the early 60s was a British film called Peeping Tom, where the killer actually films these kills. He wants to capture fear on camera. And all these films together I tend to think of as the notion of audience as the voyeur, which is what we are. We are waiting for a movie to scare us. We want to see our flight or fight response in reaction. We do expect to be stimulated and titillated. So all these films take on a new aspect. Here we are in this world of social media. You know, do we live in glass houses? You know, who's spying on us? Who's invading our privacy? Even with some of our real world horror news that's been going on recently, there's a lot of scares about cybersecurity and technology. And again, it comes back to those kind of home invasions and violations that we fear. So these films still have a lot to say, even though, you know, some people may think, oh, they're too old. They're not very old at all. This set, actually, if you're interested in some of these Psycho, a lot of the sets do have Psycho. There's some sets that'll have a lot of the earlier Hitchcock collected together. And the trouble with a lot of these is sometimes they tend to overlap the films that are included. So you can pick and choose which ones in which you're interested. Or if you're looking for the short things, you could always check out Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. Those DVD sets and some of those streaming options are available. They're shorter little crime thriller episodes. A lot of these Blu-ray sets too also have a lot of really cool features if you are interested in some of the technical aspects. I've written a lot more on some of the other films. Suspicion's a great one. You know, is Cary Grant trying to kill his wife? We don't know. At my own blog, I do actually have a non-horror blog that I think therefore I review, where I've studied some of these classics. And The Birds is another one. My mother's terrified of birds. She hates this movie. There's an extra social element where we have Tippi Hedren, who has brought these little lovebirds in a cage, and the town has started to go crazy with these bird attacks. My favorite scene with that is the little girls are in the schoolhouse and they're all singing their nursery rhyme. And Tippi Hedren is sitting on the park bench outside. And one bird accumulates, and another. And in some ways, the frame is almost in a silent shot. Even though we have the little sing-song is playing, the audience is seeing something that the character does not. And the rhythm is the same, but yet there's a building intensity. One bird, and another, and the song is playing and playing and playing. And we're going, oh no, something is going to happen. And earlier in the film, also, there's a birthday party. Veronica Cartwright is the little girl. She was, of course, later an Alien. And we have this woman who is intruded here in this town between the widowed mother and the son. And there's a lot of paranoia. Is it her fault? And again, the idea that nature has gone unnatural, that man is no longer at the top of the food chain, that wild is coming back. And these things are happening at the little girl's birthday party, at the little white schoolhouse, where horror should not be, but yet here is where it is. So that's kind of creepy. And let's be honest, I mean, Hitchcock was kind of a little creepy himself. All these films have to have the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, demure, ice queen, out-of-touch blonde, very statuesque and very sophisticated, but there's something sensual, there's something sassy about her, and we enjoy seeing horror happen to her. That's part of the thrill. I don't know. You know, Vera Miles screaming when we see what's in the fruit cellar. You know, it's Tippi Hedren in The Birds. Grace Kelly is in Rear Window, and some of the shots are just beautiful, the way they're framed of what does this woman see in him? You know, there's a whole extra kind of subversive layer to study about, you know, what is it about this kind of ideal woman that, you know, Hitchcock enjoys terrorizing? You know, we also see a little bit of that in Vertigo. I don't want to say too much about Vertigo. It's one of those films that I really think you have to see for yourself. There's been a lot of new talk, well, not new, but probably a long time coming talk about, is it the greatest Hitchcock film ever, or is it even one of the greatest classics ever, up there with things like Citizen Kane. It is a great movie. I don't know if it's, you know, super the best, but Hitchcock was actually very shrewd in some aspects of the business and the industry in a time when there was still a lot of contract studios, where he was able to buy back a lot of his material. And Vertigo was one of the films he bought back. When I was a kid, Vertigo wasn't available. You couldn't see it. It was this elusive lost Hitchcock picture. So it was a big deal when it actually was re-released on video for the first time. And I think that sort of withheld, kind of added to its mystique. It is a bizarre film. It's very colorful. Kim Novak is just enchanting in it. It needs to be seen at least once. Maybe some people like it, maybe some people won't. But it is weird. It is bizarre. It is a good one. North by Northwest is also included on this set. I've actually discussed a lot of James Bond on my blog, I think, before our review, and North by Northwest is a Bond movie. I mean, let's be honest, it has Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint. Everybody's probably seen the, you know, still of Cary Grant outrunning, you know, the plane. It is a great one, so if you're interested in Hitchcock, you know, it's probably one of the must-see ones that you should get. This little set has some of the things from the 40s. Notorious is another must-see one. It's a very noir spy thriller, probably kind of the definitive in some ways. When we were watching Crimson Peak recently, you know, there's a whole sequence about changing the keys and swapping the keys out, and I thought that's straight out of Notorious. So there's a lot of pieces of it. Ingrid Bergman is in that one. Rebecca, I spoke about on our previous video, talking about some of our classic horror reads. Now for the Hitchcock movie, he did have to change the ending. The Hays Code was still firmly intact here in the 40s when Hitchcock first came to Hollywood. And he changed the ending, but it is still a very moody, creepy gothic piece. And that's mainly because of Dame Judith Anderson. She's playing the Mrs. Danvers role. And Mrs. Danvers she would be pathetic for her obsession with Rebecca, trying to keep Rebecca's image alive, if that didn't make her so dangerous. So it's a very chilling, very moody piece. You know, the black and white and the photography is very stunning in it. I also love Spellbound. If you had to press me for a Hitchcock favorite, I may even say Spellbound. I really like that one. A lot of people don't. They think it's a little weird, a little out there. It's all about psychoanalysis. There's scenes with overlays with doors opening to her mind, and there's the Salvador Dali dream sequence. There were also a lot of technical things in there that were quite advanced. Not Gregory Peck in the sport coat when he's skiing, and it's obviously totally fake, but there's a crane shot with a gun that has to turn to the camera, which was a very technically difficult thing to do at the time. And there's even flashes of color for significance in the film. It's a very simple case of amnesia. Is Gregory Peck the killer or not? But there's something about lines on white that seem to set him off. So as a viewer, as you're watching the movie, every time you see those kind of things, you're waiting, oh no, is this what's going to happen? Is it, you know, when there's lines on the tablecloth, oh my goodness, she has a striped white robe. You know, when you're seeing shots where they're entering the bathroom and you see that the entire bathroom is kind of white tiles, and you think, oh no, is this going to set him off on his killing phase, you know? So it's a little layer again of something a little bit extra that the audience is feeling and looking for, that we're along for this kind of puzzle, this mystery playing out. So I love that one, actually. So as I said, I've written some Hitchcock on horroraddicts.net. You can join us at horroraddicts.net, join the conversation. We have our Facebook group as well, where you can talk to us. Tell us what Hitchcock you love, what horror cliches you don't want to see anymore. If you're actually interested in writing for horroraddicts.net, don't forget we have our submission call for the next anthology, Kill Switch, and several intern positions. So you can go check us out. Our name is our address, Horror Addicts, by Addicts, for Addicts. I'm going to go watch some Hitchcock. Bye.